Now we have covered the architecture of Kafka Connect and understand how connectors, tasks, and workers operate. It's time to get hands-on. In this chapter, we'll learn how to install Kafka Connect and verify that it's ready to use. The good news is Kafka Connect is not a separate product that requires its own installation package. If you already installed Apache Kafka, then you already have Kafka Connect available on your system. If you need a refresher on installing Kafka itself, refer back to Kafka Fundamentals Chapter 2, where we cover the installation process in details. In this diagram, we can see how Kafka Connect fits into the overall Kafka distribution. When you download Apache Kafka, you're not just getting the Kafka broker software. The distribution also includes Kafka Connect, command line utilities, and the supporting components needed to run the platform. Within Kafka Connect itself, there are two important startup scripts. One is for standalone mode, and the other is for distributed mode. The distribution also includes several built-in connectors that are useful for testing and learning. The key takeaway here is that Kafka Connect shipped as part of Apache Kafka, so there is no additional software package to download. Before using Kafka Connect, there are a few prerequisites that we should verify. First, Kafka Connect requires Java version 11 or later. You can confirm your Java installation by running the Java version command shown on the slide. Second, you will need access to a running Kafka cluster. Kafka Connect relies on Kafka for storing configuration information, connector status information, and offsets. Finally, make sure your system has adequate resources. While Kafka Connect can run with around 2 GB of memory, 4 GB or more is generally recommended, especially for production environments. As workload increase, memory and CPU requirements will increase as well. Let's walk through the installation process. The first step is downloading Apache Kafka from the Apache website. Once downloaded, we extract the archive and change into the Kafka installation directory. At this point, Kafka Connect is already installed because it's bundled with Kafka. If you previously installed Kafka for earlier exercises, you can simply reuse that installation and skip directly to verification. Once Kafka is installed, it's a good idea to verify that the Kafka Connect scripts are available by listing the files that match connectstar.sh inside the bin directory. We should see two scripts. The first script is connect standalone.sh, which is used for standalone deployments where a single worker runs on connectors. The second script is connect distributed.sh, which is used for distributed deployments where multiple workers cooperate as a cluster. Seeing this script confirms that Kafka Connect is properly installed. Next, let's verify that the built-in connectors are present. Kafka includes a small set of example connectors that are useful for testing and demonstrations. By checking the libraries directory, we should see the connector file jar that contains the FileStreamSource and FileStreamSink connectors. These connectors aren't typically used in production, but they are excellent for learning how Kafka Connect works and for verifying that your installation is functioning correctly. Let's take a closer look at the Kafka directory structure. The bin directory contains executable scripts, including the scripts used to start Kafka Connect in standalone or distributed mode. The libs directory contains the Java libraries required by Kafka Connect. This includes the Connect API, runtime components, and built-in connector implementation. The config directory contains sample configuration files. These files provide working examples that can be customized for your own environment. Understanding where these files live will make future configuration and troubleshooting much easier. There are 3 directories you will work with most often when using Kafka Connect. The bin directory contains startup scripts and operational utilities. The lib directory stores connector jar files and runtime libraries. Later in the course, when we install third-party connectors, many of those jar files will ultimately be referenced from locations like this. The config directory contains worker configurations and connector configurations. Most of your day-to-day Kafka Connect administration will involve editing files or settings that originate here. These are the directories you should become familiar with as you begin working with Connect. Kafka provides several example configuration files that help you get started quickly. The worker configuration files define how the Connect worker itself operates. For example, whether it's running in standalone mode or distributed mode. The connector configuration files define the behavior of individual connectors. The sample file source and sink configurations are useful for learning because they allow you to test Kafka Connect without requiring external systems, such as databases or cloud services. In real deployments, you will typically create your own connector configuration files based on these examples. After installation, it's important to confirm everything works correctly. The verification process starts by ensuring the Kafka infrastructure is running. If you are using Zookeeper mode, start Zookeeper first, followed by the Kafka broker. Once Kafka is available, start Kafka Connect in standalone mode using the sample configuration files. If the worker starts successfully, and you will see log messages indicating that connectors are being initialized without errors, then your installation is working correctly. This simple test provides confidence the Kafka Connect is ready for further configuration and experimentation. As your environment grows, you will likely want to configure a few useful environment variables. Setting Kafka Home makes it easier for scripts and tools to locate your Kafka installation. Adding the Kafka bin directory to your path allows you to run Kafka commands from any location without specifying the full path every time. The Kafka heap option variable controls the Java heap size available to Kafka Connect workers. Adjusting these values is often necessary in production environments with larger workloads. Finally, the log directory variable can be used to centralize Kafka Connect log files for easier monitoring and troubleshooting. For convenience, these settings are typically added to your batch RC or batch profile, so they are automatically applied whenever you logged in. Let's summarize the main points from this lesson. Kafka Connect is included with the standard Apache Kafka distribution, so there is no separate installation process required. The Kafka package already contains the scripts, libraries, connectors, and configuration files needed to get started. Built-in file connectors provide a simple way to test your installation and learn the basics of Kafka Connect. The installation process is primarily about verifying prerequisites, understanding the directory structure, and confirming that the worker can start successfully. In the next lesson, we'll take the next step and configure a standalone Kafka Connect worker, allowing us to run connectors in a simple single-node environment.